Recently in class, we've been talking a lot about values and where do those values come from? How do we apply those values to certain aspects of our lives, decisions we make, behaviors we incorporate when we're in particular public settings? And with that said, when you start getting into that kind of discussion, you start getting into the notion of ethics. So, what are ethics? Ethics is basically our moral philosophy. It's a way for us to systematize, defend, and recommend concepts of right and wrong behavior. So when you go to that grocery store and you really want that candy bar and you find out that you don't have any money, but you really want that candy bar, you apply a litmus test of whether or not to steal that candy bar or to just go ahead and do without it until you can go back and pay for it. Ethical theories. Philosophers today usually divide ethics into three general subject areas: meta-ethics, normative ethics, and applied ethics. Well, what is meta-ethics or meta-ethical origin? That's the way I kind of like to look at it sometimes. Well, meta-ethics investigates where our moral principles come from and what they mean. So, like for instance, you might say, well, I really strongly believe in loyalty. And you learn that particular principle from your parents. Your parents is the meta-ethical origin that you learn that particular principle. Okay? If you say you love, you need to go ahead and earn as much money as possible so you can go ahead and you can afford those nice clothes, you learn that principle maybe from American society that really kind of embraces materialism. What are normative ethics? Normative ethics are like the practical look at ethics. To arrive at a moral standard that regulates right and wrong behavior. So think about our laws that we live by on a daily basis. Like for instance, speeding, right? We know that speeding is against the law, so you might go ahead and say, hey, you know what, I'm not going to speed because it is against the law. May involve articulating the good habits we should acquire, the duties we should follow, the consequences of our behavior, and it is the ideal litmus test of proper behavior. And it was interesting a long time ago when during the John Kerry and George Bush debate, they got into this conversation about preemptive striking. If a particular country was a threat to the United States, we should go ahead and have the right to go over there and attack them first. And John Kerry says, no, that is, we have to pass a litmus test of getting the blessing from all of our alliances. And George Bush says, no, we shouldn't have to look for the approval of other countries to defend our own territory. So it was kind of an interesting conversation. I always kind of go back to that example when I think about normative ethics and normative principles. And then there's applied ethics. And applied ethics is basically how do you apply these normative principles to controversial issues in your life. So, there's always that whole notion of, like, for instance, let's give it the controversial issue of abortion. You get pregnant, and then you go ahead and you apply different litmus tests to your decision of whether or not to keep the baby or to terminate the pregnancy. That would be an idea of a controversial issue. Another one is, what is the ultimate deciding factor, and that is utilitarianism. Which utilitarianism is what's going to be the greatest amount of happiness to the greatest amount of people. So here's an absurd type of example of utilitarianism. Pretend that a person walks in the room with a gun. And that person goes ahead and puts the gun to your head and says, hey, all right, pal, I will shoot you and spare everyone else in the room. Or I kill everyone in the room and I spare you. Well, a utilitarian will think to themselves, yes, it'll be sad, of course, if I die. However, look at how many people would be so saddened if everyone in the class or in the room dies. So you would go ahead and you would say, okay, I sacrifice myself on behalf of everybody else in the room. You kind of have that altruistic type of mentality. And therefore, that's utilitarianism. You're thinking about what's going to bring the greatest amount of happiness to the greatest amount of people. So here would be like, this is an example. It's kind of interesting. It might be a little bit difficult for you to see up on the screen, but this is, here I got this question here, but I kind of like this image. I want to kind of go over this. So here you have this image, and here you got this, you look down here, and this guy is being thrown into this fire pit here. And this guy is saying, they approve of human sacrifice. That's their descriptive report. Oh my God, these people like human sacrifice. And this guy is making this principle. Let's say he lives by the notion of thou shalt not kill. And it says, how dreadful, what a barbaric culture this is that they, that they agree with human sacrifice. And then this guy is saying, whoa, wait a minute. What does he mean by dreadful and barbaric? In his moral outrage, rational and justified. On what grounds? What he means by on what grounds? What grounds are you thinking this is dreadful and barbaric? Yeah, you might think from your culture human sacrifice is dreadful and barbaric, but in their culture, this is completely appropriate and purposeful. So let's kind of go back to that notion of normative principles that we apply to our daily lives. Well, one is personal benefit. How is this decision going to benefit me personally? Social benefit. How is it going to help me benefit socially? Like, if I make this decision, will I earn a lot of friends? So if I stuff that kid in the locker, even though I was taught that is wrong, heck, I would make a lot of friends, or people would think I'm really cool because I went ahead and picked on this guy. Yeah, it might be the wrong crowd, but this is the crowd that you might be looking into getting into, so it would be a social benefit to you. Principle of benevolence, which is basically you're helping those in need. You go ahead and you offer that homeless person a couple dollars so they can go ahead and get a sandwich. You're helping those in need. And then there's the principle of paternalism, which is assisting others in pursuing their best interests. So, like, for instance, say, both of your parents work, you're the older sister or brother, you have a younger brother, and you have to kind of basically be a parent to that younger brother while your parents are trying to make money. And therefore, you go ahead and you look at what is in the best interest of your younger sibling. Say, like, for instance, you push them to do well in school because you feel that's in their best interest. Principle of harm, okay, that you don't want to cause harm to other people. Principle of honesty, okay, you believe in truthfulness and being honest with those around you. The principle of lawfulness, showing the laws. And this is kind of an interesting one, principle of autonomy. And a lot of us as high schoolers are going through this right now. You're looking for individualism. You want to separate yourself from your parents, from maybe your religion, maybe from your teachers, and you're starting to want to incorporate your own morals and your own values, and sometimes you completely rebel what one place is, one meta-ethical origin is trying to teach you because you want to feel individualized from them, separate from them. Principle of justice, what is just and what is unjust. So you kind of like to see justice happen. So say, for instance, you go at home, you're separating a fight between your two siblings. You want justice. You want the person that did wrong to be punished. And then the principle of rights. So think about equal rights, for instance. You feel that this is my constitutional right to be able to, do a particular thing, marry who you want, or to have that personal freedom of choice, whatever it might be, but that would be like the principle of rights. So let's kind of give an idea here. I'm going to leave you with this question, and this will really kind of get you thinking. And in 1982, a couple from Bloomington, Indiana gave birth to a severely retarded baby. The infant, known as Baby Doe, also had its stomach disconnected from its throat and was thus unable to receive nourishment. Although this stomach deformity was correctable through surgery, the couple did not want to raise a severely retarded child, and therefore choose to deny surgery, food, and water for the infant. Local courts supported the parents' decision, and 6 days later, Baby Doe died. Think about it. Did the parents make the right decision? Apply, your meta-ethical principles, meta-ethical origin, and normative principles to your answer. So, like some of you might say, well, I'm from a Christian background, and therefore they taught me the principle of thou shalt not kill. And therefore, my decision was I would do everything in my power to let Baby Doe continue to live. Some of you would apply, like, for instance, my parents taught me the principle of harm and paternalism. And you might go ahead and you might say, well, here I am no longer looking at an individual. I'm looking at a baby that will continue to have not live a normal life, maybe possibly suffer their whole entire life. And therefore you feel it's in the baby's best interest and to not suffer anymore. And therefore you decide to allow the baby to pass on. So you kind of look at it from those two lights. It makes for an interesting discussion. I hope this presentation kind of give you a nice little background of the introduction of ethics. We're going to be working with this quite a bit, and we'll be taking probably another little quiz to kind of make sure that you watch this little presentation, and take care.